Imagine a simple, unknown young man, a miner from Wales with no formal education and no fame, who, with just one simple phrase, sparked a revival that set an entire nation on fire, leading over 100,000 souls to surrender to Christ. At 13, he began praying fervently for a revival, and 10 years later, at 26, God answered with a fire no one could put out. Churches were packed, streets filled with tearful crowds, hearts transformed. But what happened there wasn't just a change in people's faith, it was a revolution that stopped entire towns. It all started with a young man, Evan Roberts, crying out, "Revive Wales and bend us, Lord." A simple prayer that became a national cry. Today, you'll discover how God used this young man to spark one of the greatest revivals in modern history, touching thousands of lives, families, and communities. Stay with me until the end of this inspiring story. And if you want to see how a life of prayer can transform a nation, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that will strengthen your soul. Evan Roberts was born in June 1878 in the small town of Luhur in South Wales, a simple place of humble workers surrounded by coal mines and grey hills. His family was part of the working class. His father was a blacksmith, and like many at that time, life was hard, marked by sweat and the silence of the earth. But in the middle of that simplicity, something special was planted in that boy's heart. From an early age, Evan was raised in a Calvinistic Methodist Christian home, where faith in God was taken seriously. He grew up hearing the Bible read aloud, attending fervent services, and learning about the fear of the Lord. Even as a child, he was known for his unusual spiritual seriousness. While other boys ran through fields or played games, Evan was often seen silent, eyes down, carrying his Bible, the very same one that would become his inseparable companion. At 11 years old, as was common then, he had to leave school to work in the coal mines. Imagine a boy, with small hands and a sensitive heart, going down into the dark depths of the earth to help support his family. The environment was harsh, noisy, dirty. But even there, Evan didn't leave his faith behind. He took his Bible into the mine and during breaks, read the scriptures carefully. Some co-workers thought he was strange. Others mocked him, but he didn't care. From a young age, Evan sought something he himself may not have fully understood yet: intimacy with God. There was a thirst in him, a longing no ordinary activity seemed to satisfy. He prayed constantly, read the Bible with devotion, and even without understanding the future, he already felt God was preparing him for something great. He wasn't eloquent, nor charismatic by the world's standards. He was just a common Welsh boy with calloused hands and a broken heart. But God saw what no one else saw. And there, behind the silent scenes of a village forgotten by the world, a revival was already quietly being born. Even as a young man, Evan Roberts carried a growing conviction. God wanted more from him. Attending church wasn't enough. He felt the Holy Spirit stirring his heart for something greater. He spent hours in prayer, often alone, crying out and pleading for a revival in his nation. He prayed with simple words but unusual intensity. "Lord, bend the nation. Start with me." In 1904, during a meeting in Blaenenchurch with evangelist Seth Joshua, Evan heard a phrase that ignited his soul. "Bend us, O Lord." Those words echoed inside him like a divine call. Something changed right then. Evan realized the time had come, and God was about to move. Shortly after that meeting, Evan attended a prayer vigil that would mark his life forever. That night, he was deeply touched by the Holy Spirit. He felt as if heaven had come down on him. A weight so intense it made him pray and weep for hours. He would describe that moment as his baptism of power. When he left, Evan was transformed. With shining eyes, he said, "I have seen a whole nation ready to bow before Jesus." God had marked his heart, and the revival was about to begin. Even while studying theology in Newcastle Emlyn, Evan felt a clear direction from God. Return to Luhur. It seemed crazy to leave his studies to preach in his hometown, but he obeyed. At the first meeting, only 17 young people showed up. Nothing seemed to indicate that anything extraordinary would happen. until the presence of God filled that small place. People began to cry, confess sins, and seek God urgently. It was as if heaven itself had manifested there. The flame had been lit, and soon it would spread throughout the nation. After that first meeting in Lahore, something extraordinary began to happen. The news spread with supernatural speed. Within days, other churches in the area began inviting Evan. Within weeks, hundreds were attending the meetings. Within months, there were thousands. Evan Roberts didn't preach in a conventional way. He didn't follow scripts or fixed liturgies. His meetings were spontaneous. He prayed, sang hymns, waited in silence, and let the Holy Spirit lead everything. There was no focus on elaborate theology, but on total surrender to God. Churches were packed beyond capacity, with people standing outside, trying to hear through the windows. Crowds came from neighboring towns, traveling by foot or train just to attend. It was common for services to start at night and only end at 3 or 4 in the morning, with no one wanting to leave. The atmosphere was filled with tearful prayers, spontaneous worship, and broken hearts. What started with 17 young people in a forgotten village was now shaking all of Wales. The revival didn't stay confined to churches. It spilled into the streets, homes, courts, and even coal mines. Miners, many once known for cursing and fighting, now gathered to pray before work. Hardened men returned tools they had stolen, asked each other for forgiveness, and sang hymns as they descended into the depths of the earth. Bars and pubs emptied out. Some even closed for lack of customers. Jails were empty. Crime dropped drastically in several towns. There were even cases where police had no work to do. Instead of making arrests, some officers formed police choirs, singing at revival meetings. In some courts, judges received Bibles as a symbol that there were no crimes to judge. Wales was being transformed, not by laws, not by politics, but by the power of the Holy Spirit, which had come down on a nation through repentant hearts. The impact of the revival brought fame to Evan Roberts, but also a heavy burden on his shoulders. He wasn't physically strong, and the intense pace of meetings, prayers, and fasting began to take its toll. Evan spent hours alone in prayer, often in deep fasting, seeking God's guidance to lead the ever-growing crowd. But the spiritual and emotional pressure was too much for a young man of just 26 years. In 1906, exhausted and weakened, Evan had to make a difficult decision: to step back from public leadership of the revival. His tired body needed rest, but his heart never stopped praying for the nation. After stepping away from public leadership, Evan Roberts chose a quieter, more reserved life. He spent his later years in seclusion, accompanied by his friend and fellow spiritual leader, Jesse Penn-Lewis. Even away from the spotlight, Evan never abandoned his deep faith. He continued to pray fervently for the revival and the transformation of Wales. His life became a quiet testimony of humility and devotion until his death in 1951, at age 72. A simple man, yet powerfully used by God to shake an entire nation. The Welsh revival, fueled by Evan Roberts' passion and obedience, wasn't limited to Wales. Its impact echoed worldwide, inspiring a new wave of revivals and spiritual awakenings. Evan Roberts, though an ordinary young man, showed that what God values most isn't fame, charisma, or social status, but the willingness to be used by the Holy Spirit. He was a living example of how fervent prayer, personal holiness, and humility can move mountains. His story remains alive as a call to all of us. No matter your age or circumstances, God can use you powerfully if you simply say yes and make yourself available. As Evan once said, "You don't have to be famous to be used by God. You just have to be available." And this eternal legacy continues to inspire hearts around the world to this day. If you felt inspired by this story, watch the next video and learn about the life of John Hyde, the man who spent his life on his knees in prayer, an incredible example of dedication and spiritual power. Click here to watch and discover how prayer can transform not only you but everyone around you.